My name's Aaron Masliansky. I'm the host of Inside the Skev, which is a podcast that focuses on the people and organizations of Skokie and Evanston primarily, but I definitely talk to many people around town. And I have the great pleasure to be doing these interviews for the JCC Chicago. And we've been interviewing people from the JCC Jewish Film Fest, people who are, we had a whole thing for the Holocaust last week, and this has been really fascinating. And today I have the pleasure to speak with Moran Berman, who is the Counsel for Public Diplomacy and the Consulate General of Israel in Chicago. And we're going to talk about the movie called Hummus, the movie. And it's such a delicious movie that really brings about a lot of different aspects of Middle Eastern and Israeli society, and it's just a fascinating way to put it all together. So, Moran, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So the movie, it's so delicious. Hummus is such a great thing. Where do you think why is it so important as a staple in Israeli society?
So I think every society, every country has its own food that's more than food. It's a symbol, and it's something that people are always eager to know where's the best hummus, or where's the best pizza, or where's the best burger, or where's the best pasta, or wherever you go, people are always asking themselves, and that becomes a symbol. But hummus is actually a very big thing in Israel. For those of you who visited Israel, you know that this is a big thing. And I have to say that as an Israeli living in the US, it took me some time to get used to the dish that you call by mistake in the US hummus, which I don't know what it is. It's definitely not hummus. And also one thing that I have to mention when I speak about that is that in Israel, hummus is a usually lunch. It's not a dip. You don't dip your pita chips or your whatever crackers in hummus. It's a dish. 2 pitas, hummus, some toppings, and that's lunch. And people in the US are still having a hard time of understanding it. And so hummus is very Israeli. People buy hummus in the supermarkets, and they go to special hummus places, and fancy restaurants serve hummus, and simple restaurants serve hummus, and kids love it and adults love it, and people are always arguing where you should get the best one. So just, it's Middle Eastern, obviously. It's not only Israeli, but I think in Israel it really became very, very big.
Well, there's another movie that it's about Israel, and then there's a lot about hummus, but don't mess with the Zohan. In that movie, everything has to do with hummus, and he brushes his teeth with hummus.
He brushes his teeth, yeah. So I never brush my teeth with hummus, but I like the joke, because Israelis are obsessed with hummus, and that's true. That's true. I admit it.
Have you found any hummus in Chicago that's at all comparable to what you find in Israel?
So the only place that I think is worth mentioning is relatively new. It's owned by an Israeli, actually it's a couple, Israeli and American. It's called Lashuk. They are now part of Politan Row. It's a food hall in the West Loop. Obviously, it's not open these days, but it's an Israeli guy married to an American woman, and this is very good hummus. I hope soon they will reopen, and when they'll reopen all the restaurants. So this is my favorite in Chicago.
Yeah, I hope that they're doing at least pickup.
Yeah, I think now they are doing it. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So the movie, though, did the Israeli government have anything to do with the movie, putting it together?
You would think that, but no, the Israeli government is not part of this movie. It was produced, or one of the partners in the production is a pro-Israeli organization that used to be called Jerusalem U, and they are involved. I'm not sure if they are the executive producers, but they are involved in that. The movie was not supposed to be used for Israeli public diplomacy, and it basically speaks about people more than it speaks about Israel, or even speaks about hummus. Especially people and especially the diversity in Israel through the stories of the people in it. But I'm very happy to speak about our film like that, that again does not tell the history of Israel or does not tell stories that we know about Aliyah or about the 6-Day War or about the Zionism. It speaks about food and the people of Israel, and that's, I think, maybe the evolution of public diplomacy today. Speaking about Israel, but not through the usual stories and history of Israel.
Yeah, and it's really the stories of the people in their lives. I mean, you look at all the different restaurant owners and, the struggles that they dealt with. And, Suhila in her business, she's the only Muslim woman that is running this, and, how she interacts with the rest of society. And, the scene where she's at the shop with the Moroccan Jews and talking to them about, life, and it just shows like the mixture of cultures. It's not where it's really nice, where everyone is really interactive. And then you see the guy who wanted to start another business in Germany, and showing the struggles, and then his father passes away while he's gone, but it's his dream to make this all happen. And it's not your typical where everyone, where I guess like common culture thinks about Israel. And, even the Eliyahu Shmuli, his whole business, where you have no idea, like, at least for me, when I started watching the film, I thought, okay, he's got a little place, a little thing off the side of the road. But it turns out this guy's got a major chain of restaurants. So it really, the characters build so much through the film, right?
Yeah. And by the way, Eliyahu, every time I go visit Israel, I see more and more of this chain. I think it's probably the biggest hummus chain in Israel, as far as I know. But each one has its own story, really unique story. I think maybe stories you can only see in Israel. For example, you mentioned Eliyahu, so he tells how he got in a mysterious way, he got kosher tahini when he wanted to close his business because it wasn't kosher. So some guy brought it to him and disappeared. And it made me think that I know some of those places, some of those hummus places, but I didn't know the story behind them. And it made me think that maybe people who make hummus are special people because it's 4+ stories of people who are, hummus people. I don't know. We have to find a word in English for that.
Hummus people. Well, hummus is, it's a food that brings people together, where you're sharing pita and you're dipping it, and it's like you think about it in a circular dish too, which is all communal.
Yeah.
No,
In Corona days, it's weird to think about eating with your bare hands,
right?
But this is what you do. You take the pita, and many times they bring you in the simpler hummus places. They bring you the pitas with their hands, and they literally give it to you in their hands. So it's almost like eating in someone's dinner table. And also obviously it's not. It came from the Middle East. It's very common in the Arab communities in Israel, and like we saw in the film. But obviously Jews love it and Arabs love it. And if you go to some of these places like Suhila and the other ones, you'll see Jews and Arabs and Christians and tourists all sit and eat hummus. And also, it's a very simple dish. You don't need fancy ingredients to make a bowl of hummus.
No.
Basically, hummus, for those of you who don't know, if there are, basically hummus is a dish made of two major ingredients, which is chickpeas and tahini, and pretty much some toppings and some spices and lemon, and that's it. But somehow these people and others in Israel were able to have this magic of making their dish so good, even though it's basically two major ingredients. So there's this whole thing, around hummus that's you can't really describe it. It's a really special dish.
The simplicity of it is what's so delicious about it in a way, and sometimes that's what makes the best dishes. But it's like they make minor tweaks, and that's what makes it so different than somebody else's.
Yeah, and everyone who tried to make hummus at home and gets to a result which sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not that good, but then you say, how can they make it so good? And I did whatever they told me, or I did whatever the recipe said, and it's not even close to what I ate at this place. So yeah, it's I don't know. It's a mystery. It's a mystery.
The ingredients. So the film though, it's part about culture and trying to tell the story of Israel and changing the narrative. And you are in charge of public diplomacy here, for the consulate. How do you see other films, influencing people on how they view Israel? Like you look at like a show like Fauda, and looking at, that aspect of society. But there's other things, that have come out throughout the years, where Israel competing in the Olympics and winning, and in all these different things. How has that changed the public perception?
So I think that culture is a very, very important tool that we have in public diplomacy. Culture generally, and films specifically, not only documentaries like Hummus or like other ones, but also feature films. And I don't think I have to tell it to the audience of the JCC Jewish Film Festival. But definitely it's something that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel, we have a special department that is in charge of cultural diplomacy. And we have someone who what he's been doing is in charge of the film industry. Mm-hmm. As part of the cultural diplomacy division. So we take it very seriously at the Israeli Foreign Ministry. And I think that, you have films like Hummus, which is very, positive and funny and tells this story of diversity in Israel. But you have films, documentaries or not, that can be critical of Israel. And sometimes we diplomats or other people, they're not sure that it's right for us to participate in a screening of films that are critical of Israel, or that might show a different side of Israel that might not be so beautiful. But I think personally, and also this is what the foreign ministry thinks, that as long as it's good art, it's good film, we want to show it and we want to screen it. I attended, for example, a screening of a documentary that tells the story of a Palestinian child from Gaza who's in a hospital in Israel. This is a very good film, but it's very critical, by the way, both of Israel and of the Palestinians. And I was asked questions after the screening by the audience, and it wasn't that easy. But I think it's important for me to be there. I think it's important for us, for Israel as a democracy, to promote Israeli art, whatever it is. We're not only promoting films that are showing Israel in the best way, and we're proud of it. We're proud of bringing art because it's good, and not because it makes Israel look better.
Well, I think that makes Israel look better, that you show things that can be critical, because there's nothing more ugly than a country that is autocratic and doesn't have any type of dissent or public discussion. And I think by showing those types of pieces that may be critical but are thoughtful, I think are beneficial to the reputation of the country. it's a more
Yeah,
free
and
society
also
that way.
when you only show good things, and by the way, also when I speak, if I will only say that the good things and how perfect Israel is, I don't think people will see that as being very honest, or saying seeing the whole picture. So that's very important, to show that we're not a perfect country, like any other country, by the way,
Right.
even though we get more criticism probably for more criticism than any other country in the world. We're not perfect, and other countries are not perfect as well.
Well, there's definitely some challenges within government of trying to pick a leader. So that's been interesting to watch. How does that affect you, though, being in your job when there's constantly these elections that keep coming up?
So it has an effect. The last year or so, with the three election cycles, were not easy for us, especially because until we have a fully functioning government, our budget is pretty much frozen or partially frozen, because until we have a fully functioning government that can pass a budget law, we don't have a real budget, so we use budget that we have in a different way, and we also don't know. Now we know we hopefully will have a government very soon, but for the last year or so, we didn't know when we would have a government, and it's hard to plan ahead when you don't know if you'll have the full budget that you were used to next month or
Right.
next week or in 6 months. So that was a challenge for us. I think Israelis are known for being prepared and ready for every change and every challenge, and expecting the unexpected. So I think we managed, and we did some great projects in the cultural field, but also in others. And hopefully the next months and years, at least for now, we'll have a full budget, and we will be able to go back to normal. Now we have the corona, obviously, which
Right.
also makes everything more challenging, but hopefully we'll get back to normal with a real budget. And I have to say that technically I was experiencing three votes of three election process at the consulate. So I was the head of the committee, of the ballot committee of the consulate. And the Israeli law is a little bit different than the American law. Not every Israeli citizen is eligible to vote outside of Israel, only people who work for the government of Israel or the Jewish agency. So we had about 80 people voting at the consulate, and I was in charge of the committee, so I had to check their IDs, and I had to work according to the protocol, with the notes, with the ballot we got from Israel, and that was very interesting for me. And I usually, most diplomats do it 3 times, so that was fun, but other than that, it was a very challenging time with the elections, not only for us diplomats, but also for Israelis.
Yeah, hopefully that there are no more elections for a little while. Talk about coronavirus and how it's affecting Israel. We see things in the news. How are things going there, and how, as compared to what's going on here in America?
I think what Israel did correctly was to act very, very fast, closing its borders. For example, we were one of the first country to close its borders completely to any non-citizens and non-Israelis. And I heard from Americans when we did that it's not the right thing to do. Because all we do at the consulate and at the Ministry of Tourism and other Israeli organizations is trying to get people to come and visit Israel, and now we're just telling them don't come. But I think it took a few weeks, and everybody realized that that was the right thing to do. And I think we got to a point now that Israel is slowly starting to open up. Actually, last week they started to open up, and next week they are starting going back to schools, kindergarten first and first, second, third grade. They did some changes, less students in every classroom, etc. But we are starting to open up, so we are after the peak. We are after the worst, and we are starting to open up. So I think that was a good reaction by the Israeli government, and we at the consulate are trying to work with local authorities, governments, governors, and also hospitals and other organizations to see if we can help, if they can help. Just as an example, there was a plane full of medical equipment flying from Chicago to Israel, and a way of how the local industries and organizations are helping Israel, but it's a two-way street. So we are trying to work together with our counterparts in the Midwest to see how we can, fight together.
Moran, are you there?
Hang on, everybody. Hopefully he'll be coming back.
It's just a frozen right now.
So while we're waiting for Moran to come back, I will tell you that we had the pleasure of having Moran make hummus for us at our Shabbat on the Lake program.
How was it?
I don't remember if I had it. Let's see if Eileen remembers. Eileen, did you eat it?
Yeah, so we had 700 young adults, and they all were able to take the hummus home with them, right? At Shabbat on the Lake. Remember, Moran, when we made the Shabbat on the Lake?
Moran is MIA right now.
No, he's here.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
While you were gone, we were telling them about how we made hummus at Shabbat on the Lake. Can you imagine 700 young adults? Like, it's a fun night. It's Shabbat, it's dinner, but it's very schmoozy. But I don't know how many gallons of hummus we made that night, but people were taking it home with them and so excited,
a lot.
And they were happy to make it themselves. Not to be like getting something that came from like Saba or something, there's a big difference between what you buy in a package.
Oh yeah.
And when you make it from scratch, you cannot even compare it.
I worked when I was in college at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign Hillel. I worked in the kitchen, and I would make a lot of the food. So we would make tons of hummus for different holidays, and it was a lot of fun to make it. It was easy, but it was delicious. And it's so much better. You're right. So much better than store-bought. It's a world of difference. And we'd make falafel too. So it's pretty good. Moran, what do you do in Chicago? What are some of the activities that you do to engage the local community and share Israel with everyone?
So I'll give an example maybe from before time of Corona and
right.
Recent
Everything
example.
has changed.
So yeah. So we do a lot. So cultural events or Israeli films in different festivals is one example, but we also work on the economic level. So, for example, we are participating in major economic conferences. One of the biggest ones is CyberTech that is now happening every year in Indiana, but it's for the whole Midwest, and it's with cyber experts from Israel, mainly cyber companies and experts from Israel. It's an Israeli organized conference that's happening in Indiana and in Israel and in other parts of the world. Very, very big, and the governor of Indiana hosted it. And if I'll mention one more thing that happened in the time of the last cyber tech is a new concept, I think, and because we cover 9 states, we are based in Chicago. Our focus is Chicago, obviously, and the area, but we cover 9 states. We said, why don't we take the consulate for a few days to some other state? So we did it with Indiana for a few days. So we had the diplomats there. It was during cyber tech. So cybertech was there. We had cultural event there. We had events with the governor and with legislators, and we call it pop-up consulate because now, you know, we have pop-up restaurants, pop-up shops. So it was pop-up consulate in Indiana. We actually plan to do it this year in Michigan, but you know, Corona changed everything, so I'm not sure. But what we did now, two activities from the last week that we did at the consulate. One of that, we did a webinar with an expert of innovation from a Sheba hospital in Israel for students, not specifically about the Corona, but about innovation in the medical field in Israel. And we had students from throughout the Midwest participating in it. And also we wanted to thank the medical teams in local hospitals. So we did a delivery of lunches and coffee and pastries. We did it once with Mount Sinai Hospital in the West Side. And actually today we did it with Stroger Hospital, that's part of the Illinois Medical District. And we plan to do it with Rush Hospital probably next week. And you know, that's our way of thanking the medical teams. There's nothing, you know, very Israeli about this other than the fact that we want to thank them on behalf of the Israeli people for what they do. So it's very important to us as well. So there's a little note saying thank you from the Israeli consulate. And I'm very proud of it that we were able to do that. Sorry?
Yeah, it's huge relationship building.
Yeah. And Mount Sinai, by the way, it's an ongoing relationship with the consulate. You know, with the Jewish community, basically, they started the hospital, but we had the director of a big Israeli hospital visiting Mount Sinai a few months ago, and then Mount Sinai had a delegation to Israel, and now they have teams working together mainly on dealing with trauma, because in Israel, unfortunately, the hospitals are very good at dealing with trauma because we have, unfortunately, terror attacks and you know, rockets from Gaza and other things. And in the west side of Chicago, you have gun violence causing trauma. So we were happy to find teams from this hospital in Chicago and Shamir Hospital in Israel, that's the name, to work together to find best practices. And this relationship brought to us doing that with them now, thanking them for the work that we do, especially this is a hospital in the west side of Chicago, and which is not one of the best areas for that. So it was very important for us to be there.
Absolutely. Do you have consulate offices throughout the United States, or where are they located?
Yes, so Israel has 9 missions throughout the US. We have the embassy in DC, and we have 8 consulates. Each consulate covers a number of states. So we have New York, Boston, Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, Houston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And we also had a consulate in Philadelphia, in which I was Deputy Consul General, but they decided to close the consulate and to redistrict the consulate in the US. We have 8, but the Chicago consulate has the biggest number of states, 9 states, and the biggest region in terms of geographically. So we have a huge region from the Dakotas to Iowa, Nebraska, and Indiana, and Michigan. And I was lucky to visit all of our states except Nebraska and the Dakotas. And I hope I will be able to visit them as well.
Well, yeah,
not in the
that's
winter.
An interesting thing. Like, is your office open right now? How do you still do your work with the stay-at-home order?
So the consulate is open, and the consulate is an essential workplace. And people have to remember that we also help Israelis all the time, but especially in times like that, we have cases of Israelis that have to go to Israel for different reasons. So we stay open, but we also work with other organizations and in areas for which we have to stay open. Most people work from home. I work from home most of the time. I go to the consulate a few times a week, but we do stay open. Everybody is still working, and the work has changed, obviously, but the consulate is open as usual. And I'm happy that, my colleagues from the foreign ministry that are in places like China or Italy, they don't close their embassies or consulates. They are there. Some of them, the families are in Israel, and they stayed on their own for months. In China, we have to remember this situation has been going on since late December. And so the diplomat, and they are in charge of getting medical equipment to Israel and getting Israelis, getting help to Israelis, and getting Israelis to Israel when they have to go. So I think this is a very challenging time for the whole Foreign Ministry of Israel. And I'm happy and I'm proud that we can do all of that for Israel.
Well, it's critical work. And, Israel is really global, how connected the country is. I happened to be in Thailand last summer, and I stayed at a hotel for a couple of days that was Israeli owned. I was literally thinking in Hebrew by the time I left. Like, there's so many. I'm just curious, why is there such a great relationship between Israel and Thailand?
So the story goes is that an Israeli asks a Thai person, you know how many people there are in Israel? And the Thai said, you know how many Israelis are there? So the Thai person says, yeah, about 9 million. But there are only 9 million in Thailand. So the Israeli, no, there are only 9 million at all. So I ruined this joke, but I hope you got it. So yeah, places like Thailand and sorry for that, places like Thailand and other countries have lots of Israelis. I think as almost every Israeli visited Thailand, actually more than once, and I love it. And I think there's something in Thailand that, really fits Israelis, and the weather is great. There's very nice beaches, shopping, everything is very cheap and very easy. It's very easy to travel from one place to another. And what happens is that more and more Israelis come. So there are hotels owned by the Israelis, Israeli restaurants with Israeli food, and menus in Hebrew, Chabad in every major city pretty much. And so it just became very easy. So Israelis are coming back into Thailand. And yeah, some of the places in Thailand, you just can't believe you're not in the beach in Tel Aviv or something. You can get hummus in Thailand and jachnun and pita and schnitzel and everything Israeli in most major cities. So it's really amazing. And Israelis like, when there's a place we like, we tend to go in masses. So if you go to the neighboring country, to Myanmar, and I visited Myanmar and I met maybe 10 Israelis in the months I was there. In Thailand, you meet 10 Israelis just by going to a taxi, because there are 10 Israelis in every square foot, I think, in Thailand. So that's the difference. And so we like to, when we like a place, we just go.
Yes. Well, I think it leverages the power of the country, and by having so many connections around the world. You know, one of the things that I like to do, I'm involved in this global real estate. What I do for a living is I'm a real estate agent. So we try and make connections all around the world. That's why I was in Thailand for a trade mission. But I think it's so important that you have all these connections around the world, and you could share ideas and you could help each other and invest and, you know, learn new cultures and whatnot. And I think that's why it's so important that what you do, you know, here to share Israeli culture in America. You know, and we talked earlier in the conversation about film and how film is such a great way to share that the culture with everybody and share those stories. How do you think things will be affected as we go on with coronavirus and, you know, film not being able to really take place for who knows how long, and, you know, even going and sitting at an Israeli restaurant and having hummus? How do we maintain those connections and grow those connections during this time?
Yeah, I think that it poses a big challenge, but I think that this, for example, and a Zoom call I had earlier and this week and other events show that we can adjust very easily when we need to. And, you know, eventually we might not be able to be close to each other physically, or to meet, or to shake hands, or to hug. But we are able to speak, we are able to communicate, we are able to share ideas, we are able to share culture. We are not able to share food yet. Hopefully we'll be able to do that soon. But, you know, I think that I just had a conversation with a friend about the differences between how Americans react to the whole coronavirus situation and how Israelis react. So I think that Israelis, as I said earlier, are used to uncertainty and changes and challenges. So I think we were very fast and getting used to the new situation. But what I think Israelis are not so good at is being planned and organized. So now when the Israeli government wants people to go back, or students to go back to school, there is, to say it not diplomatically, there's a mess, because they're not sure who will go back and when, and they only decided not all the classes and not in the same way, and the parents were all confused. And I think Americans are much better than Israelis in planning and in explaining things and in organizing big projects. So it's interesting to see, you know, every country and every people, how they react. But I think that surprisingly, this is a very, very big challenge and one of the major crises in recent history. But it's amazing to see how the technology and how pretty much the humanity was able to overcome it and to find new ways of doing everything that we used to do.
Yeah, it really is amazing how we can adapt as humans, and, you know, these Zoom calls and everything like that. It's, if this wasn't a platform, we wouldn't be having this conversation necessarily right now, and all these other things. And basically, it doesn't matter where you are. You know, we had a conversation the other day that people were in Israel, and another day somebody was in Turkey. And it's, you know, I heard a conversation, I'm very involved at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and they had somebody on who was in Singapore, and they wouldn't have had him on for, you know, one of their events that they have where people come speak. But this opens up the platforms and opens up actually more connections potentially.
Yeah.
but I think every country is doing something a little different, which, every country has the right to do. Would you rather see it be where there's a more coordinated global effort or where countries figure out things on their own?
I think it's always right to have a coordinating effort when that's a global challenge. I mean, it's not a challenge that only affects one or even a few countries. It's a challenge that literally affects every country in the world, not all of them in the same way, but I think the only way is to fight it together. And it's a challenge to when you get politics in the way of working together. But I see, at least from my point of view, how Israel works with the US, how Israel works with South Korea, with China, and with other countries together on that. And one thing that I think is very unusual, I'm not a scientist, but groups of scientists from lots of different countries and different institutions work together and coordinating a way to win, to fight this virus. And it's also something that, as far as I know, is not usual. They're not competing with each other. Obviously, we have politics. So I think that the only way of fighting this global challenge is by working together. Obviously, I'm a diplomat, so we are always trying to build relationship between countries and trying to work together. But I think in this case, it's very clear that this is the way to solve it.
I agree. And I hope that we're able to work more together once we hopefully have a vaccine and different treatments to be able to ramp up production where everybody around the world can get access to it. That's the key.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one last important question. Which is your favorite hummus in Israel?
So it's a hard question. Me and my wife had an argument, or we were having an argument for the pretty much last 6 or 7 years since I got to her place and she got to my place. And I have to say that after years of discussion between me and her, I got to the conclusion that her place is actually better. And so it's now, first of all, my wife is always right. That's one conclusion. But my recommendation for hummus in Israel is Khalil in Ramle. It's actually close to the place that's on the documentary. It's very close. It's not the same place. It's close. It's famous. Owned by an Arab-Israeli family from Ramle for decades. And it's close to the open air market of Ramle. Again, when it's open, it's very close, which is also recommended, but I think this is definitely my favorite. And I will add that from the movie, Hummus the movie, my favorite is Suhila. It's an amazing hummus. Akko is a beautiful city, but Suhila is really, really good, and I was there a few times. So I will also recommend Suhila.
Well, I can't wait to take an El Al flight when I can and go to Israel.
It's close to the airport, Ramle. So if you happen to have, I don't know, a connection in Israel for some reason, and you have only a few hours, and you can't get far away from the airport, you can go get hummus and come back on time for your flight. So that's my recommendation.
I will keep that in mind, but I think I'd stay there for a little longer than just a connection. But thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to speak with you, and for all of you to join, and anyone who watches this after the live recording. But thank you, and everyone, please stay well. Thank you.